Okay, so chapter 12. Chapter 12. Central nervous system. They call it the central nervous system because it's in the central part of the body, the center of the body. Okay, the brain, the spinal cord, that's what we're going to talk about. Thank you. It consists of those two things, the brain and the spinal cord, and it comes from ectoderm. The spinal is just like this nervous system itself. When we're developing, there's three layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, and this is the layer that the nervous system comes from, the outer layer of the body. It folds, it has grooves and sulci in the brain itself to increase the surface area, and we'll go over those in just a little bit. The brain is divided up into different parts. We have the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. And they all have their nice big words, right? The proencephalon, the mesencephalon, the rhomboencephalon. Those are the areas of the brain. We can divide those up. Just like in the skull, remember we had the anterior and middle posterior fossas? Remember that? I never asked that question, did I? Shoot. I'll go back and ask that one next time. So. Yeah, I've never had a final practical. That'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it? All right, so this is kind of where the parts of the brain actually fits in. The telencephalon is the cerebrum, the two hemispheres with the cortex, the white matter, and the gray matter. So what color is the brain? What color is your brain? Gray. Okay. The outside of it's gray. What's the inside? White. That's right. Outside's gray, inside's white. Just basically for, the inside is white because it's got myelination in it. The outside is gray, it doesn't have myelination, so it's a very quick, fast thinking part of it. The diencephalon, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and epithalamus, all are part of that area. The thalamus and hypothalamus are the pleasure areas of the body. We'll talk about those too. Mesencephalon is the brainstem. Metencephalon is part of the brainstem, the pons and the cerebellum, and then the myelencephalon is the brainstem, the medulla oblongata. So those are just separations of the brain. Just gives you, they don't tell you what they do. They're just different segments of the brain. So let's go on and find out what's in these. So we're going to talk about the adult brain regions, the cerebral hemispheres, the diencephalon, the brainstem, and this cerebellum. Those are all the things we're going to talk about in this coming up little section here. So this is an outside view of the brain, and we do have a brain in the back in a bottle can back there, or a jar back there with alcohol on it, and it's the brain of a student that didn't study. We just no, we didn't take it out, but we should maybe. I did have a woman one time, one of my students, volunteer her ex-boyfriend's brain, but he wasn't into that. We didn't get that done. So the outside of the cerebral hemisphere, then we have the diencephalon, which is the purple part here, this purple part, right here. And then we have the midbrain up here, and with the pons here, and then we have the medulla oblongata there. So what's the big deal about the medulla oblongata before we even talk about it? What's the deal with water boy and the medulla oblongata? Does anybody remember?
Is that where you would have, like, if you got a spinal injury there,
You would actually die. If you had a spinal injury there, you'd die. It's the very primitive areas of the brain. But I think the water boy was the thing that it made the crocodiles or alligators were very mad because they didn't have toothbrushes and all those teeth or something like that. It was part of the medulla oblongata thing. I don't know. So the parts of this, we have the spinal cord and the brain. The spinal cord is, everybody knows where that's at, right? That little opening in the vertebrae runs up and down. We'll talk more in detail about that as we go through it. And then the brain has white and gray matter, and so does the spinal cord. And those are just basically set up in tracks so that the information can go up and down the spinal cord very quickly and across the brain very quickly. So we have different areas of the brain do different things, and we'll talk about that. So this is a cross-section of the spinal cord. As it goes up and down the back, it varies very slightly. Most of it, though, looks like this very bottom picture, where we have the spinal cord. Inside looks like a little butterfly. That's the gray matter that looks like a butterfly. It's the interneurons that's going back and forth across the spinal cord. The white part of it around the butterfly are tracks that goes up and down the spinal cord to the brain and to the feet, back and forth. That's the neural track. That's the neural highway, if you want to look at it that way. But we have a central canal, or a central cavity up and down, that bathes this area with cerebral spinal fluid. The brain and the spinal cord both float in this fluid that we produce inside the brain. The epidermal cells create this fluid, and it bathes the outside of the spinal cord. So when you go get a spinal tap, they pull a little bit of that spinal fluid out, and that's where that comes from. So we'll talk about that as we go down here too. Massive headache, depending on how much they take, but you'll just, they say it's just terrible.
Just from the changes in the fluid that causes that? Or?
Right, it's like they're taking out, instead of the brain floating, now it's drying out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, really, that's the simplest version of it. But part of it's pressure around the brain, and part of it's just there's not enough fluid around it. So inside the head and brain, we have what we call the ventricles, and they're lined with epidermal cells, and these epidermal cells create cerebral spinal fluid. That's the fluid that bathes our brain and spinal cord. It runs up and down, and it's pumped up and down. Every time you breathe, you move that spinal fluid up and down the spinal cord. So the third ventricle is the diencephalon, the fourth ventricle is in the hindbrain, and they produce this fluid. Now, the brain itself, it's rough, it's convoluted, it's not smooth. If you ever looked at a brain, if you've ever seen a brain, they have these little bumps on it, right? We call the ridges, we find are called the gyri. And they have shallow grooves, and the sulci are the deep grooves. And the fissures are even deeper yet. So we have those that create the bumpy part of the brain. Now, the reason for this is that it creates extra surface area so that we can think better. We're better at this. Dinosaurs had brains about the size of a pea. They were huge, but that's all they needed. They didn't have the reasoning, the voice, the thought processes that we do. All they would do is eat, poop, and die. That's about it. So we have a much more complex outer covering of our brain that gives us cognitive abilities, conscious thought, so we need a little bit more surface area. So there are 5 lobes in the brain. We have the frontal, the parietal, the temporal, the occipital, and the insula. Now, what do those remind you of? What do those names remind you of? Bones, right? Now that you've had all the bones, this kind of follows along with this so that you can understand where these parts are underneath it, because you're all experts now in the cranial bones. Right? See, that kind of neat? We learned the cranial bones first and then the parts of the brain. Does that make sense now? So we're building on this stuff. The insula is a little bit different. It's farther inside. There's no really bone next to it. But we'll show you the markings here in a minute. Down the center of the brain, we have the central sulcus. It's a deep cut, separates the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe and the postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe. So it separates the front and the back of the brain, basically. Then we have the longitudinal fissure, which lies basically right under the sagittal suture, right? Does everybody remember where that's at? Right down the middle of the brain, the head. And then we have the transverse cerebral fissure. It separates the cerebrum and the cerebellum. This is in the back. This is all separations of the brain. So here it is, the brain on blue stuff. Right? It's got some blue stuff running through there. What are those blue things? Looks like little worms. Veins, yeah, blood vessels. The blood comes in from the inside and goes to the outside, and then it drains off. So it's constant blood flow to the brain. We need lots and lots of blood flow to the brain. You cut the blood flow to the brain dies. It does not come back. So we have to maintain a blood flow. But anyway, this is the parts of it. Here's a longitudinal fissure here, this part right there. And then we have the frontal lobe, which is the part right there in the front. The parietal lobe here, and that basically takes up most of this. But then back here we have the occipital lobe. Those are all part of that, the brain that's underneath those cranial bones. So we have the right and left hemisphere. They separate them. Can you live without part of your brain? If I said, okay, we're sorry, but you have a terrible, terrible disease, we're going to remove the right side of your brain.
Don't they do that with people that have seizures? They
Yep.
remove half the brain.
They sure do, especially in little kids. They've done, I know of a 12-year-old female that had half of her brain removed. Half of her brain removed. Now, they're never going to be 100%. You have to understand that. You take off half the brain, the body can't adapt completely to that. I mean, we're going to have some deficits. Because some of the parts of the brain deal with speech and voice recognition and face recognition and things like this. So you can actually lose a lot of your cognitive abilities just by losing half your brain. That's pretty massive, right? Losing half your brain. That's pretty traumatic. I was watching an ER show last night where the guy had driven a post through his mouth to the back of his head, and it split the jugular and the carotid arteries apart, and it never tore them, didn't break them, anything. When they pulled it out, he had very little bleeding. It was amazing how it worked, but it was one of these posts that you make a chain link fence from, so it was pretty good sized. Pretty gross. I love it. All right, so here's the side view. The very bottom is the brainstem, and then we have the transverse cerebral fissure down here at the bottom that gives us that separation from the cerebellum and the cerebrum and the rest of the brain. Okay. Onward. Cerebral cortex. The outside of the cerebral cortex is actually very thin, 2 to 4 millimeters. That's not very thick. That's gray matter. That's very quick, fast connection between the nerves themselves. But it makes up 40% of the mass of the brain because of all those convolutions, those gyri and sulci. They make up more surface area. The outside of the brain is the area for conscious mind. So you have two parts of your brain, or two parts of your mind. You have the conscious and the subconscious part of the brain. What's the difference between those two? Does anybody know? Can't control your subconscious, okay. Okay, so the conscious part of your brain is the part of your brain that you're using right now. You're thinking about what this is all about, what parts of the brain, everything else, okay? But you're also thinking about, oh, I got to pick my kids up. I hope my babysitter is doing this. All these thousands of things. What's for supper? We got date night coming up on Friday night. What am I going to do? What am I going to wear? All these types of things, okay? Are all going through your brain all at the same time. Maybe not. Some of you, maybe you're just thinking nothing. I don't know. But most of the time, we can't think of one thought before another thought comes into our brain. Did you know that? We have a hard time finishing one thought before the next one comes. The subconscious part of your brain is the part of your brain that says, hey, don't worry about it. I got this. I've done this before. It's the part of the brain where it has things like riding a bicycle, tying your shoes. All those things are in the subconscious part of your brain. All the memories that you've had previously are buried kind of in that subconscious part of your brain. So the conscious part of the brain is the here and now. The subconscious part of the brain is kind of the automatic pilot of the brain that keeps you going. Have you ever got in your car and next thing you know, you're home? You don't remember? Yeah, yeah. She remembers really good. Happens a lot. So what happens there? What's going on? That happens to a lot of people. Don't feel bad. You're normal. See? I can tell you, you're normal. So what's going on? Well, the conscious part of your brain has got thousands of things to think about, but your subconscious says, hey, I've done this. I've driven this home before. It knows exactly where to turn, when to turn. Next thing you know, you're turning your car off. You go, oh, wow, I got all this other stuff to get out, but my car got home automatic pilot. Right? It's kind of scary when you think about it. You don't remember turning at Washington Street or whatever, right? Or even stopping. Did I stop at that stop sign back there? Your body told you to. It did. It's done. But that's the conscious part of the brain. It's constantly working, thinking about things, and the subconscious part is kind of underlying tones. Okay? The subconscious part of the brain is what I work on when I do my hypnosis. I try to get into the subconscious part of the brain and change the habits and change the bad things that brain has got buried in it, bring them out and turn those into a positive response. Yeah, I'm a certified hypnotherapist.
So why don't you hypnotize me to study?
Hypnotize you to study? Well, first of all, you have to want to do that. You can't make changes on anybody that doesn't want to make changes. So, I do usually in the spring have a fun night, but I haven't had one for a couple years. Maybe I should resurrect that. We do hypnosis. We do a bunch of fun stuff. Maybe I'll do that. I don't usually do group hypnosises too much. I just do one-on-one hypnosis. They're a lot easier. Okay, so also, so the side of conscious part of the brain is awareness, sensory perception, voluntary motor initiation, communication, memory storage, and understanding. That's all on the outside of the brain. Each hemisphere connects to the other side of the body. So the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So does that mean that if you're right-handed that you're left brain dominant? Not necessarily, not always. Okay? And we'll talk about what right brain and left brain means. I have a little test that you can do to see if you're right-brained or left-brained person. There's three types of areas that we'll talk about in the cerebral cortex. The motor areas, the sensory areas, and the association areas. Motor areas are involved with control of your motor, your muscles, okay, movement. The sensory takes the sensation that's coming into the body and accepts it. The association area is the integration part of it. So what do I mean by integration? What does it mean to integrate something? 2, 4, 6, 8. We don't want to integrate. Just a big saying back in the 60s. Yeah. Bring it in and mesh it together and figure it out, right? We're putting everything together. So when we integrate things, we take all this information and we put it together and we come up with an idea or a thought or a response, right? So that's the integration part of it. So in our bodies, we take the sensation from the outside of our bodies, we send it to the brain then integrates that with previous memories and previous thought processes, and then sends out a response. Okay? Pretty rough stuff, huh?
Strong today.
It's that vodka that does it. So conscious behavior involves the entire cortex. So what we're doing, what we're thinking about, we have this, our brains are firing, just like electrical buzz all over the outside of our brain. It's amazing. You put someone in you can actually measure that. You can measure that in machines. So the motor areas of the brain are involved with lots of different things, but basically movements of different parts of it. So these are some areas that we're going to talk about as we go through it. Here is the brain from the side, and it has the different areas that we can associate with. So different parts of the brain are responsible for different functions that we do. Okay, so let's look at some of these. We have pretty small. Maybe I can make that a little bigger. Not for you, but for me. All right, so we have here's the working memory areas right here. Problem-solving areas there. We have the primary auditory right here. We're here, right about this area. We also have external acoustic meatus. Remember? That's about there. Our visual cortex is back here. So when we look at something, that information has to go clear to the back of the brain, and then we kind of work its way back out through to remember what we're seeing. One of the things that we have to remember is that our brain doesn't have any set patterns when we're born. We don't know anything when we're born. We don't know smells, sights, sounds. We have to learn everything. So all these parts of the brain come into play when we're doing that. It's not just one part of the brain that forms that image or that response, that integration. It's all the parts of the brain coming together, creating that integration part that so we understand that a skunk is not a kitty cat. We get that idea later, but we don't know those initially. Primary motor cortex allows for precise, skilled movements. We find this in what we call the homunculi. Now let me show you a homunculi here. They've mapped out the brain. Now what they've done is they open up the skull, and since there's no pain in the brain, they can go in there and touch the brain. You can touch it and they don't even know you're touching it. You can take a stimulus, a little electrode with a little electrical impulse on it, and you can make them do funny things. Touch one part of the brain, right about here, right there, and their thumb will move. They can't stop it. You put a little electrode on there, it just boom, 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 boom. They can't stop their thumb from moving. Okay? If you put stimulation there on the part of this brain, this is the outside of the brain. The red part, that's the cortex. If you stimulate that part, they feel it in their mouth. Their tongue moves. Pretty cool, right? Here's their tongue right down here. It makes it move. So they've mapped this out. They go, okay, what are you going to do now? What do you do now? What do you do now? They can make people move just by doing that. They're awake. These people are wide awake. They got the top of their skull off, and they're zapping them with little electrical charges. Boop, 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 boop. They're making them do weird stuff. And that's how they've mapped out the brain. They call it the homunculus. And that's kind of fun, I think.
That section was called the
Yeah, they map out the whole area,
Oh,
the motor part of it, yeah. That goes to the muscles. The premotor cortex is the anterior part of the precentral gyrus. It controls learned, repetitious, and pattern motor skills. Okay, so part of this deals with like tying your shoe and riding a bicycle. This and the cerebellum work together and do this. So planning of movements depend on the sensory infeed, how much we're getting. The Broca areas are anterior to the premotor area, and they are present in one hemisphere, usually on the left side. So they have the motor speech area that directs the muscles of the tongue. Now you use your tongue a lot when you speak, right? Try to say something with holding your tongue. It's very difficult to do because you can't make noises, right? It's tough. So when we do this Broca's area is developed in us for speech. In your cat, your dog, lizards, they don't have the Broca area in their brain. It's not there. They don't have the speech areas that we do. They make noises, but they don't cognitively speak like we do. We have a gene that actually helps us to speak.
I wish they did.
Wish they did, so you could, yeah.
Makes things more.
You know, in reality, we don't, I think we've really kind of not explored that as much as we could as far as talking with the animals. I know people have spent their lives trying to figure that out, but they haven't got it figured out yet. How they say dolphins can rationalize and think about things, and mice can do weird stuff, you know, like go through mazes. They're pretty smart. So maybe there is some type of speech that we're just not picking up on. I don't know. So if you would lose the left side of your brain, you'd probably lose the ability to speak. Because if it's only in that area of the brain, then you lose that. You would adapt. So it prepares you to speak, gets you ready for it. Frontal eye field. This is the anterior to the premotor cortex and superior to the Broca's area, and it's voluntary eye movements. So you can roll your eyes around when somebody says something stupid, right? Now the sensory areas of the brain are all over the brain too. We have the primary somatosensory, the somatosensory association, the visual areas, the auditory areas, olfactory, gustatory, visceral, sensory area, and the vestibular cortex. Whew. Wow. Those are all associated with the cranial nerves, basically, and specialized areas, specialized nerves of around the brain. And we'll talk about the cranial nerves as we go through them. But the primary somatosensory. Somato is body, sensory is sensation. So we're taking information from the outside of the body, the soma, and bringing it to the cortex. This is in the post-central gyri, behind the motor functions. It receives sensory information from the skin, the skeletal muscles, and the joints. So this tells us where we're at in time and space, where we're at, where our arms are, where our joints are. It gives us an idea where things are so we can make a response. So if we have a motor homunculus, we also have a sensory homunculus. So this is telling us where the sensations are coming from, or coming from and going to in the brain. And it looks pretty much the same as the motor one, except that they're just a little bit different area in the brain. So we can set things up. Sensations are, you know, we have lots of sensations, but look at the tongue. The bigger the part, the more nerves are coming into the brain for that. The tongue has lots of nerves, so it's pretty good sized. The hands has lots of nerves coming off of it, so it's pretty good size. Okay? So we have lots of different ones. The nose, of course, it has lots of smell coming in. The lips, very sensitive. Here's part of the head, the neck, all these different things. Genitalia here, the sensation of the genitalia, the erotic zones. Those are all very sensitive, so they all have its own space. So if you would take an electrode and stimulate that area, you'd get pleasure. You'd have that sensation, right? So we can do some weird stuff to people without them even knowing about it. The somatosensory association cortex associates everything that comes in. Gives us determined size, texture, and relationship to the objects that we're looking at. So if we're feeling something, like there was a show where Pitch Black, I think it was called, where people would walk into this room and they couldn't see anything, but they had to feel their way or find out what it was. Maybe it was a bunny, maybe it was a snake. They had no clue until they actually touched it. You know, that's kind of scary thought. It really freaks you out when you can't use all your senses to come up with something. It makes it really difficult. So we have to not only have sensation from our fingers, but the rest of our senses will make a difference. Visual areas. The primary visual cortex is in the back of the brain. Color, form, movements, all these things that are coming into the brain, then we take that information and we disseminate it. We figure out what to do with that. So when we look at a tree, When you actually look at a tree, the tree comes in as being upside down and backwards to the back of the eye because of the way that the lens is shown up. We take that information and we send it to the back of the brain says, oh, I'm going to flip that. So it flips it upside down, and it also tells you what color that is. The color of the tree is now green. We know that because we've experienced it. Okay, so we put that into different perspective as where it goes. The auditory areas around the temporal bone, of course, temporal lobe, stores memories of sounds and permits the perception of sounds. So, again, when we're fetuses, we don't have a lot of references as far as sound. Now, they say that as the fetus matures, the baby can hear. So if you're arguing with your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, that's going to go into the baby. They can hear those things. Sound waves can travel through skin. Also, if you're reading to your baby, you want to read some Harry Potter to your baby or whatever, read out loud. If you're pregnant and you're reading, read out loud to them. They're supposed to have done studies, and they say that it makes their kids smarter by reading to them, singing to them. Helps a lot. So we can perceive those in different areas. Olfactory cortex. This is our smell. Smell. Awareness of odors. How many odors can we smell, do you think? Depends on if you have a teenager or not, right? About 10,000 different odors we can smell. We're pretty lame, though. Dogs, I think, are like 60,000, something crazy like that. So those all go to the olfactory cortex. The gustatory cortex, this is found in the insula, and it deals with taste. Gustation is taste. It comes from the tongue. We can get all that information. The visceral sensory area tells us what's going on in our gut. The stomach, full bladder, those types of things. I gotta pee. I know what's going on. It goes to that part of the brain. The brain says, So it sends information to the motor cortex to send an impulse down to that area to stop you from urinating. Controls the sphincters and stops that process. If you don't have that response down to those muscles, the sphincters, to stop the urination, you will wet your pants. Okay? So sensations come in, and then we have to decide what to do with that. Just because it says, okay, my bladder is full, doesn't mean it's going to evacuate your bladder immediately. We have the ability to override that, send information back down to it, and stop that. The vestibular cortex is responsible for awareness where we're at, as far as our head, the spacing, where we're at in space. If you're spinning, or if you're out in the ocean, this is the area that is being affected. This tells us what we're doing. Again, the same picture we had before, just showing us different parts of it. We have the hearing. Hearing here. We have the different areas for hearing. Then we have vision, taste, all these different areas that we can see in the brain. I'm not going to make you map these out or have a diagram where you have to do this. These are some things that you can look up. Most of the time you don't have to know those if you're a patient. If your patient comes in and says, what part of the brain is my smell? Look it up. Say, just a minute, I have to check with an outside person or something. You go look it up. You can do that. Multimodal association areas. These are receives input from multiple sensory areas. So this is like we get all sorts of things going on at once. It's hot outside, where someone is touching us, it's dark. We get all these sensations that are coming in to our bodies, and it tells us, gives us an idea what's going on. Okay, so we have to bring things together into an area that we can adapt and integrate those thought processes or those sensations. So allows us to give information to information received. What does that actually mean? What does that sensation mean? Is someone touching me? Is it a bug crawling on my skin? Am I scared? What are those going on? So we store these as memories, and at some point we're going to bring that back out. You know, we get sprayed by a skunk. That memory is very strong. It's going to come back on us, and we're going to stay away from the skunk. Right? Then we decide what action to take after we get this information to the brain. We have to decide. A good example of this is this afternoon it's supposed to rain, right? So you look out the window and you say, oh, it's raining. What do you do then? What do you think? Okay, you know that it's raining. You can see that, right? You can hear it. You can see it. Maybe you can even smell the rain. You know, you get some. So you know that's rain. But then what do you do for that? Take a nap? No. Yeah. Okay, so you have to go pick up your baby. You can't take a nap. You got to go pick up your baby. What do? Put something with a hood on. What else? What else could you do?
Get an umbrella.
Get an umbrella. Okay? So we've got this idea. Rain equals umbrella. Right? Or rain equals get wet, so we need an umbrella. So we can rationalize that process out. Right? So that we take an umbrella, we don't get wet, everything's fine, everything's good. We got it figured out, right? We don't just walk out in the street like your dog does and get all wet and shake, right? We have the ability to take the umbrella with us. The dogs can't. They don't have that ability to think about those things. Everybody get that? That's integration. So we have three parts: the anterior association area, the posterior association area, and the limbic area. These all involve cognitive recall and personality in the prefrontal area. Working memory, judgment, reasoning, persistence, and consciousness. Okay, so if you damage the frontal area right behind here, it's going to affect lots of different things. It's going to affect your judgment, your reasoning, your recall, your personality. You can be people that have damage to their frontal lobe become nasty people sometimes. Instead of being really nice and congenial, they are very vulgar and crass, and their social abilities deteriorate because of these things in this area. Their social environment is now different. They're not nice people anymore. We'll talk about Phineas Gage coming up here a little bit. Posterior association areas, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. These are where you recognize faces. Now, I'm pretty good at recognizing faces, but names, not good, right? Yeah, who is that? I'm always asking my wife, who was that? Who was that? You know, I can't put the name and the face together. I think there's a disconnect somewhere in my brain. Either that or I'm just a guy. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Women have a better connection with that, right? Is anybody here really good at that? Can put names and faces together and remember everybody? You in the back, you were good at that? That's good.
I have like people that I went to school with that I remember their names, but like classmates here, I don't know, like when I was younger, I didn't know people.
And some of it is whether you need to remember those or want to remember them, right? There gets to be so many that you say, oh, heck, I don't need to remember that one. I don't know, you know. It's like my students. I've had a lot of students over the years. And they'll come up to me, oh, Dr. Boyer, I finally made it through nursing and I've got this job and blah, blah. Who are you? I remember your face, but I don't know who you are. Right? So someday, when you see me somewhere, say, hi, I'm so-and-so. You remember me? I will remember you. But otherwise, I'll remember your face and say, who was that? So that's just the way it happens sometimes. And I think guys are kind of bad at that too. So we involved in understanding written and spoken language. This is the workies area. Written and spoken language. We're the only ones that have that. We're the only animals on Earth that has a written and spoken language. We have a specialized area just for that. So we have the Broca's areas that help us think about it and help us prepare, helps our muscles to work. This area helps us to put this all together. So we can come up with a sentence, not just like the cavemen used to, right? We can come up with the complete sentences, the workings areas involved with those patternings. The limbic area provides emotional impact and helps establish memories. The limbic area. So if something is emotional, just like we're going to talk about memory in a little bit, but memories become stronger the more emotional they are. So if you have something that is really important to you, you're going to remember it better. And the limbic system is going to help you to put that in areas that you're going to remember. And then you'll be able to draw it out later because it's such a strong sensation. So lateralization between hemispheres. Different parts of the hemispheres, different types of things. Dominant versus non-dominant parts of your brain, right? We did, I don't know if we got that far in this class where we had to actually, we did a dominant eye. Did anybody get that yet? No, probably not. Okay, so we'll do that on next time. Let's decide what of your eyes are dominant. But the cerebral dominance designates the hemisphere dominant for the language. Left hemisphere in 90% is dominant. Okay? So let's do it. Let's find out if you have what side your brain is. Right side or left side dominant. We're going to take a look at this. Now this goes kind of fast, so I'm going to be stopping it and starting it as we go along, okay? So you'll need to turn your 3x5 card over. This will, you got to write some stuff down. Okay, ready? Oop, sound. So we're going to test ourselves. Scientists say that brain lateralization is just a myth, but the results are strangely accurate. Okay. Choose A or B and keep track of your answers. And I can pause the video. Which way is the dancer spinning? A or B? Okay? Draw a Q on your forehead with your finger. Which direction did you draw it? So it went to the outside or to the inside? To the right or to the left? Okay, you got to put that little wing thing on it, right? The little tail. Everybody got that one? Cross your legs. Which leg is on top? Left on top, right on top. So just your ankles. You don't have to do your knees, just your ankles. Cross your knees, you hurt your back, so don't cross your knees. There you go, Destiny. Which art piece do you like better? A or B? A or B? A or B? A or B? I don't really classify B too much as an art, but it's like something my kids did when they were 2. But yeah, to each his own. Okay. Fold your fingers. Which is on top? Which is your thumb is on top? We're talking about the thumb now, not your fingers. Which? Okay. What does your desk look like? B. This is at home, right? Or A? How do you take notes? A. Or B? AB somewhere in there, maybe? I don't know. No, I don't take notes. I'm okay. All right, add them up. How many A's and how many B's do you have? If you have more B's, you are right brain dominant. Right brain people are visual, outspoken, artistic, impulsive, intuitive, daydreamers, and disorganized. Okay?
Those are all of me.
Yippee! All right, so let's see what else we have here. If you got mostly A's, you are left brain dominant. Left brain people are verbal, vocal, structured, neat, analytical, good at languages, and imaginative. All right? Even if you got even numbers of A's and B's, so you can have attributes of both. It doesn't always have to be one dominant and the other. You can have a combination. It's almost like ambidextrous people that can, they can write with both hands or they can bat with both hands. They have that combination in their brain that has better communications. And that's kind of what we're talking about in here, is how we integrate things, how the brain communicates from one part to another. So how many people were right brain dominant? Right brains with B's, okay.
Only by one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 4 A's and 5 B's.
I think it'd be even because when I put an answer down, but then I changed it because, I don't know, I cross my legs both ways, but it depends.
So what part of brain would that be where you don't you second guess yourself? That second guessing part, I'd like to pluck that out of my brain and just throw it away, right? That's the bad part.
When someone has an eidetic memory, what part of their brain has to be massive? I don't understand how people can remember everything they read.
Actually, they say we remember everything. We all do. But it's photographic memory. What's happening is that the brain communicates much more efficiently than others. And they use the whole communication part of it. I knew a guy that was photographic memory. He was in my chemistry class many years ago. I would study my butt off for the whole week till midnight, 2 o'clock in the mornings, just studying this. And he would, 20 minutes before the test, he would flip through. I mean, literally flipped through the pages, and I'm ready. He'd watch TV the rest of the time. He was phenomenal, and he would ace this every time. He just made me mad. It was tremendous what he could do, but for me it was very frustrating because I had a hard time. My brain doesn't work that way.
How have they figured out how to make everyone that way?
Yeah. There's a movie called Limitless, the Limitless movie, that they did that. We've got another one. I've pushed it pretty hard. Let's do one more right brain, left brain education thing.
The left brain deals with logic, details, facts, patterns, practicality, science, and math. As the right brain deals with feeling, intuition, symbols, images, risk-taking, philosophy, and religion. With a deliberate push for government-controlled educational curriculums, generation after generation of the youth are being taught to focus only on the facts, figures, and numbers. Repetition is used to train children subconsciously to accept what they're learning. Children are rewarded for questioning the validity of the information they receive. They are ridiculed. However, the children who blindly accept the information as true and merely regurgitate the information on